5. That's the highest you can get on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Let's look at the two forecast models in very good agreement over the next couple of days, very close to each other. Bahamas, you need to look out as well as portions of Cuba and Key West as well as South Florida. So very close here, but look at this is the euro going towards the Gulf of Mexico. So this is my concern. If we're too focused in on Florida and we don't, pay attention to the fact that this could go into the Gulf of Mexico, it could also curve up the coast. So that's why I'm concerned. But right now, it looks like a potential South Florida landfall and moving up towards the northeast coastline. Also want to pay attention to Jose behind it, because Jose is also going to be potentially a storm in the next couple of days. This is the GFS model. Again, very strong hurricane, and then going out 4 or 5 days. Looks like South Florida, but don't keep your eye on this. The potential for it to go into the Gulf of Mexico is still a possibility. The potential for it to hug the coast, still a possibility. But right now, watching South Florida. Again, 5 days out, we're looking at a potential landfall this weekend. But again, 5 days out, really anything can happen. That's why we have that cone of uncertainty.
Sure.
Don't pay attention to the center, pay attention to the whole potential path. Could go into the Gulf of Mexico, could hug the East Coast as well.
Yeah, and go out and buy some water.
That's
now.
Prepare. We have time to prepare. If you live in an area that could potentially be, influenced by a hurricane, you need to make your preparations now.
There is no suggestion this is headed for Texas, though, right?
Well, listen, if it goes into the Gulf of Mexico, it's anybody's game.
Okay.
That's why I'm concerned. There is the potential for this to push into the Gulf of Mexico, and then we're going to, watch the whole Gulf Coast. So, yes, there is the potential for that as well.
All right.
Thank you, Janet.
Not good news. All right. Thank you, Janet.
Preparations are underway throughout South Florida as Hurricane Irma makes its way west across the Atlantic. Officials are closely monitoring Irma's path, including those at Miami International Airport.
MIA warns travelers should check with their airlines about flight cancellations. CBS 4's Riel Creighton is live at the Emergency Operations Center in Doral with more on preparations in Miami-Dade. Riel.
Lauren and Maribel here. This is the Miami-Dade Emergency Operations Center. This place expected to be a very busy place over the next several hours. 11 a.m. the center will be activated. County officials begin meeting to prepare for Irma. In Miami-Dade, you could already say, though, the scramble is already underway as people grab supplies, gas, food, and batteries. We are not at the height of hurricane season just yet, so officials are telling people do not wait to get ready. Get ready today if you have not already. Officials are looking at storm predictions and various models of where it could go, readying evacuation zones should they be needed here in Miami-Dade. But as we know, the first to worry is Miami Beach. They deal with flooding on a regular basis. The mayor says the pumps will be on, but they are not unbreakable.
We've pre-ordered like about 18 portable generators to make sure that our pumps have power if the power goes out. Our pumps will have power. Now, of course, these pumps are not designed to handle a hurricane.
Officials are also making this point. They can help people who cannot help themselves, but everyone else should be able to take care of themselves. You need to have at least 3 days worth of supplies of food and whatever else you need, because that's how long they say it could take to get to you. Live in Doral, Riel Creighton, CBS 4 this morning.
Tom Sater has the newly updated forecast. This caught a lot of us by surprise over the afternoon. It's now up to a Category 4. Where is this heading, and is there any chance that it may spare the Florida coast at this point?
There is a window, a possibility that maybe the system could skirt away from the U.S. coastline, but that window, Jim, is shutting rapidly. This system, Irma, is just as strong now as Harvey was when it made landfall in Rockport, and we know how it devastated them. And it's moving over the northern islands of the Lesser Antilles, over such islands such as Barbuda and St. Kitts, Nevis, Antigua, and Anguilla may have a direct hit. Think about what it did, of course, in Rockport, and they just don't have the infrastructure or building materials on that island to sustain this. What's next is British Columbia, or British Virgin Islands, and then Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands. They'll most likely have a warning soon. 6 to 9 foot storm surge. 10 inches of rain. Most of the rain, I think, may stay all over water, which will be great, but it's what happens after that. If you take a look at the timeline, it breaks it down. Wednesday into Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, toward Haiti, Turks Caicos, and then toward Cuba. Friday is going to be interesting. This is the National Hurricane Track. Now, if you look at this, you think, well, why wouldn't it just continue its forward momentum and get in the Gulf of Mexico? We can't rule that out yet, but we think we're going to see the system get pulled northward. High pressure is keeping it on the southern track, but by the time it approaches the southeast U.S. coastline, we've got a little trough here. and that should lift it northward. So we do have a window if it possibly could lift off and slide off to the east coast. But that window, as mentioning, is really starting to shut. Let me give you another idea and show you the computer models. You want to see agreement? It's a tight cluster. It gives you confidence in this system moving through. By Friday sometime, we should start to see a turn to the right. Sooner the better. However, this is what we're looking at. Until, Jim, we see that turn to the right, we cannot give anybody a time or a place for landfall. So this is critical. It is possible if it turns to the right later, it'll slide up more in toward coastal areas of maybe the panhandle of Florida. But again, we're hoping for this outcome. But again, that window is shutting. So it looks like a major category 3, possibly 4 or 5 as we get into late Sunday and, of course, Monday, which is September 11th. Jim.
Absolutely. And folks in Florida have to keep an eye on this, but also the Gulf Coast, which has already taken a big punch. Okay, yeah. Tom Sater, thank you very much. A state of emergency. Let's turn to meteorologist Tom Sater at the CNN Severe Weather Center. Tom, this is not looking good.
No, Jim, right now we're looking at Irma at the same strength that Harvey was when it made landfall into Rockport. We know what happened to Rockport, just those strong winds alone. This system is several days away. In fact, it will not reach north coast of Cuba until Friday, but that is a critical day because we believe it will take a turn to the north. That means toward either the Carolina coast or the Florida coast. First, warnings in effect for the Northern Islands and the Lesser Antilles. That's Anguilla, which could have a direct hit. St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua, Barbuda, and then it's the British Virgin Islands, U.S. British Virgin Islands are under a watch, Puerto Rico as well. Let's put this into motion for you. Here is the track now from the National Hurricane Center. By looking at this, you would think, well, that forward momentum would carry it into the Gulf of Mexico. We cannot actually just deny that, okay? It's possible, but there actually are better possibilities that we think the computer models will carry this northward. Let's take a look. When we put all of the computer models together, and again, our spaghetti plots, you want to see them clustered together. That gives you confidence. We believe that once it makes its way toward or past the Northern Islands of the Lesser Antilles, hopefully it will stay over water. Any deviation north would be more for the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas. Any deviation south would be pretty bad for Dominican Republic toward Cuba. Watch what happens. Sometime Friday, we should see the system get picked up by a trough that's dropping into the eastern U.S. But the timing is everything. If we can get a turn to the north sooner than later, just possibly, Jim, we could get saved by this. But that window is shutting. So I think that we're really looking at a major impact here next weekend on Saturday, Sunday, and most likely a landfall possibly could be Monday. But a turn to the north would make a landfall somewhere in Florida or even over toward the Panhandle. Here's the situation, though. Until that turn occurs on Friday, we will not be able to give anyone, unfortunately, a time of landfall or a location. But more and more, it looks like we will have a major hurricane that's 3, 4, or Category 5 come late Sunday and into Monday. There have only been 3 Category 5s to ever make landfall in the U.S. The last one was 25 years ago. Hurricane Andrew devastated, of course, southern Florida. Then there was Camille, and ironically, the Labor Day hurricane of 1935. So, Jim, this is something that everyone along the Florida coast and the Carolina coast really should sit down with family members and start thinking about the preparations and possibility that come this weekend, you're going to be evacuating some major areas.
Right, Tom, that's what I want to ask you, because it sounds like people in Florida, they need to start thinking about hurricane preparations. As you said, we might be 4 or 5 days off. But even for folks in Puerto Rico and the Caribbean, right, time is winding down in terms of when this storm is going to be hitting those areas, and then Florida is potentially next. What should people be doing right now?
Well, let's take a look at 2 more models. Let's put the European and the U.S. model together. Last Thursday, they were 1,200 miles apart when they ended, but they're in agreement. They're on top of each other right now, Jim, so this gives us a better idea. This is Sunday afternoon, and that's pretty close to Miami, West Palm. Both models are here. Let's take it into September 11th, and we'll get a better idea of who should start planning. Now, again, we're several days away, so obviously there could be some changes, but we believe that these models they got a great grasp on the environment, especially the European. It handled Harvey wonderfully to an unfortunate end. But again, we're looking at somewhere, possibly southern Florida, the coast.
Hurricane warnings are up for Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. This monster storm is now posing a major threat to millions of people in Florida. So let's get right to CNN meteorologist Chad Myers with the latest forecast. You predicted this within the past few minutes, Chad, and now here we are.
Well, we just watched the Hurricane Hunter aircraft fly through it, Allison, and we saw wind gusts of 186 and 192 aloft, you know, where planes fly, 7,000 feet. That's where those Hurricane Hunter aircraft, you tried to say, fly. But the fact is now the winds are getting down to the surface here, probably close to 175. So Anguilla and the BVI and the U.S. Virgin Islands, you are under warnings, and it's a done deal for you. You are going to get this storm. You are going to get the track of the storm right over some of those islands. And if you do, the winds at 175 will be devastating. As we move it along to the DR and to Haiti, there's a lot of mountainous areas here. That may tear the storm up a little bit. But notice what happened at the 8 o'clock advisory. This number at 5 o'clock said the storm in the Florida Straits somewhere around 130. Now it says 150. So that's even more impressive because the storm back here is more impressive. There are mountains in here, and those mountains will catch some of the rain. It will tear the storm up just a little bit. So this track, although not quite set in stone, is certainly pretty, you know, obvious where this thing probably goes. This storm size may still be significantly different from where we are now. Let me just say this. If you're retired in South Florida and you have kids in Michigan, time to go visit. That's for at least for now. I mean, this is still 4 to 5 days away, but, you know, why hang out?
Right. Sure looks like it.
Those models, all of them, very, very ominous.
Ago, it did become that Category 5 hurricane. The hurricane hunters were flying into it 175 miles per hour. It just needed 157 to be classified as a Category 5 hurricane. So this is just terrible news, especially for those directly in its path in the next day or so, and that includes the U.S. Virgin Islands and the northern coast of Puerto Rico, because notice it's still expected to be a Category 5 into Thursday before it heads into the Bahamas Friday, and should be somewhere near southern Florida or the western portion of Cuba early Sunday morning. And here is what's kind of the fly in the ointment when it makes that turn to the north, because all the computer models are pretty much in agreement through Friday that it's going to head into the southern Bahamas. Then where it turns to the north, the computer models now heading it right through Florida, but some of them now starting to shift it a little farther to the west, some of them a little farther to the east. So we'll know more about the long-range forecast the more we get through the week. So stay tuned. We're going to see these small changes, which unfortunately even a small change would definitely impact greatly who is affected. And as we wait to see where Irma will go, and
this storm is now bearing down in the Caribbean and posing a major threat to millions of people ultimately in Florida. Joining us now is Dr. Michael Brennan. He's the chief hurricane specialist at the National Hurricane Center. You know, we got here this morning, this thing had top speeds of 145 miles an hour. Now it's 175, and it looks like Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands could be in serious trouble.
Yeah, we're very concerned this morning about the northern Leeward Islands, the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. They're going to see potentially catastrophic impacts from the center of Hurricane Irma as it's going to affect those areas during the next day or two. Right now we have that core of 175-mile-an-hour winds near the center. We can see storm surge of 7 to 11 feet. That's certainly life-threatening and very, very heavy flooding rainfall. Those winds in the core are capable of catastrophic damage, total building failures, trees knocked down, severe damage to infrastructure in any location that gets the eye wall of Irma at this point.
So Dr. Brennan, put this in context for us. If this is a Category 5, this is the strongest Atlantic hurricane since when?
Well, we had Category 5 Matthew in the Caribbean last year, so that was the first Category 5 we'd had in some time in the Atlantic. But Irma is a very, very powerful hurricane, regardless of whether it's Category 4 or 5. There's life-threatening impacts again from wind, storm surge, and heavy rainfall.
And every single model we see
may be forced to pivot and help other states, even as it deals with Southwest Texas. Meteorologist Chad Myers with us now from the Weather Center. Chad, what's the latest on where Irma's heading?
Well, Irma's heading towards South Florida. Whether it makes that right-hand turn before it gets there is anybody's guess. But that's truly our only hope for a miss for Florida, is a big right turn. Now, it would still be a devastating storm if it hit Cuba and then Florida, but maybe only a Cat 2, not a Cat 5. Let me get you an idea. Category 5 begins at 157 miles per hour. This storm is 180. So if there was a Category 6, we'd be pushing it. Doesn't exist, but you get the idea. This is a major storm. There have only been 6 other storms this strong in the Atlantic Ocean or the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico since the Hurricane Center has been tracking this stuff. 6. So this is somewhere up there. We're going to see Antigua. We're going to see Barbuda. We're going to see Anguilla get damaged tremendously from this storm as it moves directly over those islands at about 160 to 180 miles per hour. If the storm stays to the south and hits Cuba, that'll be a devastating effect for Cuba as a 150 mile per hour storm and then turning up this way. If it misses Cuba, it'll stay strong and then turn to the right and possibly miss America. Those are our two best guesses. Those are our two best options. Now, the models have been going right toward South Florida, right toward the Florida Straits, right toward Isla Mirada, and then turning to the right and hitting South Florida. The latest brand new model that is just out is now taking the storm and brushing Miami Beach, missing east coast of Florida, and then turning it back toward Georgia on Tuesday. So could there still be some hope? So you're telling me there's a chance. John.
We'll keep in touch, Chad, over the next several days. We'll keep an eye on Irma. We'll keep in touch with Chad. Appreciate it, Chad. Up next, President Trump, Mitch McConnell, meeting face-to-face today for the first time since that contentious phone call.
Impact on the United States, the continental United States, whether it be in western Florida or maybe even as you get over to the Panhandle right now. Is there anything that could slow it down before landfall?
Well, if the center of Irma were to move a little south of our forecast and perhaps go over portions of Cuba or even Hispaniola, that could weaken the storm a little bit. But right now, we're expecting it to remain north of those islands. Trying to pin down the impacts in Florida and elsewhere in the U.S. is really uncertain now. We do expect Irma to slow down and take some sort of northward turn as we get into Sunday and Monday, but the turn could occur and take the system west of the Florida Peninsula, over the peninsula, or along the east coast of the peninsula. And the details and timing of where that turn occurs have huge impacts on what areas are going to see the most impacts from the storm, and it's just too early to sort that out.
So what's your biggest concern at this hour?
Well, the biggest concern right now is for the folks in the northeastern Caribbean. They're the ones that are going to see the core of this devastating hurricane in the next day or two, and that's where we're most confident of where the impacts are going to occur. As we get later out in time, we're concerned about the Hispaniola, the Bahamas, Cuba, Florida Keys, the Florida Peninsula. The main message for folks in Florida right now is these next few days are your chance to get ready, have your hurricane preparedness plan in place, know if you live in an evacuation zone and what you would do if you were asked to evacuate. The timing to really get ready for the storm, you want to be ready by Friday in South Florida, by Saturday up in Central and North Florida, because beyond those times, that's when we could see tropical storm force winds arrive, and that's really the end time of getting ready for an approaching hurricane.
Now is the time to pay attention. Michael Brennan, National Hurricane Center, thanks so much for being with us.
After heavy rains, in fact, this is what it looked like here on August 1st. As Hurricane Irma may have its sights set on the U.S., people here in Florida are preparing for the worst.
People in South Florida are emptying store shelves, filling grocery carts, and packing their cars with water.
It's not good for you. It's not good for the stress. You have to do it early as you can.
Monday, hurricane hunters flew through the storm for the first time as it gained strength in the Atlantic.
We'll know more as the week progresses what kind of a threat it really poses to Miami-Dade County.
Carlos Jimenez, the mayor of flood-prone Miami-Dade County, is watching Hurricane Irma closely.
The storm surge is really the thing that kills the most people, so that's what really we're worried about.
Storm surge is when the sea level rises during intense storms, pushing water ashore, leading to flooding. A recent study found Florida has 2.7 million properties at risk, the most in the U.S. Miami Beach averages around 4 feet above sea level and fights flooding at high tide on a regular basis. Last month, heavy rain turned the city's streets into rivers. The anti-flood pumps failed during a power outage. The city has ordered portable backup generators, but Mayor Philip Levine warned the pumps may not be enough.
These pumps were designed for normal rain and, of course, sea level rise. They will be helpful in the event of a storm, but they're not designed for hurricanes.
It has been more than 100 years since 2 Category 4 hurricanes made landfall in the U.S. within the same year. And with Harvey fresh on everyone's minds, the concern here in Miami and throughout South Florida is that if Irma makes landfall, it could also be disastrous. Vlad, Anne-Marie?
Mandy Bojorquez, thank you.
10 inches of rain and 23-foot waves.
Here with more on the storm's path is Dr. Michael Brennan at the National Hurricane Center in Miami. Doctor, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, good morning.
Where is Irma heading right now?
Well, right now Irma is about 270 miles east of the island of Antigua in the Caribbean. It's a powerful Category 5 hurricane. We've seen the winds are up now to 175 miles per hour. So during the next day or two, we're expecting the core of Irma to move over near some of the northern Leeward Islands, the Virgin Islands, and near or just north of Puerto Rico. And that's going to bring some catastrophic impacts there in terms of Category 5 winds in the core of the storm, 7 to 11 feet of life-threatening storm surge on those islands, and rainfall amounts of up to 12 inches, especially in mountainous areas.
So it's likely to be continue to be a Category 5 as it heads past Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. Could it get even stronger?
Well, we're likely to see some fluctuations in intensity. The intensity of these powerful storms, major hurricanes, can go up, down 10, 15 miles per hour as they go through these eye wall replacement cycles. But overall, we unfortunately expect the environment to be very favorable for Irma to remain a powerful Category 5 hurricane for the next couple of days, and then a Category 4 hurricane as it moves north of the Greater Antilles and ends up somewhere in the vicinity of the Florida Straits, South Florida, or Cuba by Saturday or Sunday.
And so what should Floridians be doing right now if these forecasts are accurate?
Well, the biggest thing for folks in Florida is to know what your hurricane plan would be. Do you know if you live in an evacuation zone? Know what you would do if you were told to evacuate by local officials? Know where you would go? Know if you need to help any of your friends and relatives or who might need special assistance getting ready for the storm. Have all your supplies ready. We're coming into the peak of hurricane season, and unfortunately Irma is a great reminder of that. But at this point, it's too early to determine exactly what sort of impacts we'll see in any one location in Florida, although the chances are increasing that we'll see some direct impacts of Irma as we get into the weekend.
Is there anything that could knock it off of that course?
Well, the models are in pretty good agreement on